You have been told that manifestation is a crutch for people who have nothing. That once someone has wealth, the rituals stop, the affirmations fade, and only spreadsheets and lawyers matter. That belief is comfortable. It lets you dismiss what you do not understand. It is also false. The people at the top never stopped manifesting. They refined it until it no longer looked like the version you recognize. What you call manifestation is decoration. What they use is infrastructure. The reaction that rises in you right now is the point. You want it to be superstition. You want it to be theater that falls apart under pressure. Because if it is not, then you have been ignoring a lever that quietly moves everything. The billionaire version does not ask the universe for anything. It programs the mind to filter differently. It sets expectations that alter decisions. It shapes environments so that probability mass shifts toward a narrow band of outcomes. It is not mystical. It is mechanical. The human brain predicts before it perceives. This is not opinion. This is how the system runs. Your cortex generates a model of what is likely, then checks it against incoming data, then updates its model. The stronger the prior, the more you ignore signals that do not match it. This is why two people can look at the same situation and see different opportunities. Kahneman wrote about fast and slow thinking. Carl Friston's work describes a prediction engine that reduces surprise. Dopamine tracks the gap between what you expected and what happened. This is reward prediction error. If your expectation is set low, you will not even look for certain openings. If it is set high in a precise way, your attention system flags different information. This is the dry core of manifestation, not magic. Perception and choice. People with resources understand that expectation is not a poster on a wall. Expectation is an operating condition. They set non-negotiable baselines for what is normal. Not goals, standards. There is a difference. A goal is optional. A standard governs behavior without debate. If a standard says that unforced errors are not acceptable, entire categories of thought and action never occur. Manifestation at this level is not a sentence you repeat in the mirror. It is a state you enforce until your nervous system treats it as default reality. This enforcement starts with identity, not the identity you display to strangers. The private script that tells you who you are allowed to be. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are. That line is often quoted as romance. It is not romance. It is engineering. When a billionaire wakes and sits in silence, they are not feeding a ritual. They are loading a role. They restrict what enters their mind in the first hour, because first input biases the day. The frontoparietal control network then allocates attention to what matches the loaded role. If the role says builder, you notice raw material and unfinished edges. If the role says defender, you notice risks and legal exposure. They pick the role on purpose. They still visualize, but not in the way you think. They do not daydream about yachts. They run repeated mental simulations of the next few moves and the failure points. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum. Prepare your mind for what can go wrong. Seneca wrote about rehearsing loss to remove its sting. That practice does not invite loss. It reduces panic. Panic is expensive. By seeing downside clearly, they conserve cognitive bandwidth when it counts. They design commitments that do not break under ordinary stress. That is manifestation. You create an inner environment in which your desired behavior survives contact with noise. They also ratchet their set point without broadcasting it. Hedonic adaptation pulls everyone back to average contentment. That pull is a hidden tax on achievement. So they do not let the win become the floor without adding new pressure. They introduce constraints that keep drive alive. This can look like taking on a new problem that forces learning, or tying reputation to a future project, or placing capital where it cannot be easily touched, not as punishment, as calibration. Marcus Aurelius wrote about doing what the role requires. These people do not negotiate with themselves for long. They remove the space where negotiation grows. Most people think manifestation is language. The elites treat language as only one input among many. They manipulate their sensory environment. They arrange their workspace to cue decisive action. They strip sources of distraction because the attentional system is limited. This is not just discipline. It is design. Selective attention is a bottleneck. If your environment triggers thousands of irrelevant micro-choices, your executive control is depleted before it reaches critical decisions. So they make choice architecture do half the work. When you do not see a stimulus, you do not fight it. That is not ascetic virtue. It is resource management. They also understand that social reality is a variable. People respond to perceived inevitability. If you can make others believe that a project will happen, suppliers, partners, and even critics change their behavior. This is not popular to admit. It sounds like manipulation. It is closer to narrative management. Robert Cialdini wrote about commitment and consistency. When a leader signals a clear trajectory and behaves in line with it, observers align. The manifestation here is to act as if the outcome is certain enough that non-believers look late. Not fake it. Maintain enough momentum and evidence that denial feels foolish. Markets are not pure math. They are psychology draped over math. The myth says the rich relax into comfort. Reality has gravity. Entropy gets everyone. They know this. Complacency invites decline, so they run negative checks. What would destroy this enterprise if it happened in the next year? What quiet risk am I ignoring because it flatters me? Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, but that princes fall when they neglect preparation. Boldness without preparation is noise. Preparation without boldness is drift. The people you imagine as lucky have integrated both. Their internal model expects friction and decides anyway. Manifestation also appears in how they structure time. Most people bring the distant future into the present only as fantasy. These people bring it in as pressure. Bezos wrote about long-term orientation as a competitive edge. When you price outcomes on a longer horizon, you accept pain now that others avoid. That pain becomes a barrier around the reward. This is not a sermon about patience. It is about discount rates. Humans discount future value steeply. If you train yourself to discount less, opportunities that look unattractive to others become obvious to you. You then build structures that make defection hard. Contracts, equity, public promises. You do not rely on raw willpower. You alter incentives so the future version of you stays in line. There is also the quiet refusal to worship balance. Not because balance is bad, because balance is not neutral. Every yes rearranges your identity. If you accept every meeting, every message, every invitation, you redistribute your attention to other people's goals. Thaler wrote about mental accounting. Time belongs in that ledger. The wealthy still manifest by protecting their non-negotiable blocks. Deep work, solitude, health, not for wellness points, for throughput. Quality of attention is the competitive unit. If you do not own yours, you are a line item in someone else's plan. Psychologically, they use priming in a controlled way, not the pop science gimmick. The real version, where consistent exposure to certain ideas increases the speed and accuracy of your decisions in that domain. If you read serious deal memos daily, you process deal quality faster. If you audit daily numbers, you spot anomalies sooner. They build these exposures into routine. Over time, their judgment looks like instinct. It is not instinct. It is thousands of clean reps. The basal ganglia learn patterns. The prefrontal cortex can then move up to harder problems. That is manifestation expressed as fluency. They also refuse to waste errors. Bayesian updating is not a buzzword to them. It is how they think. You held a belief. Evidence came in. You adjust the belief proportionally. You do not defend your identity by denying the signal. Most people get this backward. They fuse the belief to their self-image. so revision feels like death. When you lose that fusion, you can update fast without shame. This quality is rare. It looks cold. It reads as disloyal to a past version of yourself. It is the only way to match a moving world. You manifest by making your model of reality more accurate than the next person. Accuracy beats bravado over time. There is a darker segment that most ignore. Privacy is not a luxury item. It is a risk control. When you tell the world what you are building before it hardens, you invite interference. You invite premature praise, which can satisfy your need for status and lower your drive. You invite critics who plant doubt in weak places. The rich manifest in silence. They show results when exposure strengthens the position instead of weakening it. This is not paranoia. It is operational security. You keep your inner script off platforms designed to harvest your attention and sell it. You let people see the surface that suits your goals. Another aspect will bother you if you cling to fairy tales about merit. They design luck, not the event, which no one controls. The surface area, number of trials, breadth of network, readiness to recognize a pattern. They cannot force a break. They can place themselves where breaks happen and stay there long enough. Taleb described anti-fragility, systems that gain from disorder. When you structure your exposure so that small negatives do little harm and large positives help a lot, you can want volatility. You cannot copy their capital. You can copy their bias toward setups that let upside dominate downside. That is manifestation as risk geometry. Notice what is missing. There is no conversation about crystals. No asking the sky to rearrange itself. The talk around energy is a half-true attempt to name a real property. Your state does alter how others feel in your presence. Mirror neurons, affect contagion, and simple attention cues make that unavoidable. If you enter a room with a clear aim and low neediness, others take that map as reality. If you enter unfocused and hungry for approval, you collapse into their priorities. This has nothing to do with mysticism. People read signals. They update their behavior in ways you do not see. The person with the strongest frame does the manifesting. The rest conform. You may ask why they keep going after they have everything. The phrase "everything hides the truth." You think of consumption. They think of control, legacy, and the engineering problem that never ends. The world changes. Threats evolve. The sense of meaning shifts. They manifest not to collect objects. They manifest to stay in command of their story. Schopenhauer wrote that will is the core force in humans. Unchecked, it degrades into blind craving. Directed, it becomes creation. Wealth does not end will. It amplifies it. If your will is weak, wealth corrupts you. If your will is disciplined, wealth expands your field. There is one more cut that separates classes of people. Some wait to feel ready before they act. Others act to become ready. The latter group uses embodiment to edit identity. Move as if, and the brain follows. Gallwitzer studied implementation intentions. When a cue happens, a behavior follows. The elite hardwire these links. When X happens, I do Y, no debate. This is not pretend. It is conditioning. Over time, this removes uncertainty in places where uncertainty costs. That is manifestation without hype. You choose what you do under load in advance, then you practice it until it sticks. Contrast it with the common pattern. You consume motivational content. You feel an emotional spike. You tell yourself a story about the future. You do not modify your environment, your inputs, your standards, or your risk exposure. Days pass. Nothing changes. You decide manifestation is fake. Or you find a more extreme version of the same content and repeat the loop. You want heat without friction. You can have warmth for free. You will not get fire without fuel. The people you envy built furnaces. They feed them on schedule. They do not care if an onlooker approves. You do not have to like any of this. You can reject it and call it cold. You can hold the fantasy that nice outcomes will arrive because you are nice. The market will not argue with you. It will just ignore you. Advertising firms will install desires. Platforms will decide your attention. Employers will define your goals. Friends will recruit your time for their emergencies. You will be busy. You will feel important. You will not own your life. The ones who do still manifest when they have money, because they know money only removes one layer of friction. Responsibility replaces it. Here is the final part that makes this knowledge uncomfortable. Very few people can hold this frame without bending it into noise. They want hacks. They want steps. They want safe public rituals. They do not want to live inside a demanding identity that burns off laziness. They do not want to accept that almost everything around them is designed to keep them predictable and harmless, so the knowledge stays quiet. It is not a secret because of a conspiracy. It is a secret because most people will not carry its weight. They would rather outsource their will and keep the story that fate is in charge. If you have followed this far without flinching, then you are already different. The techniques are not fireworks. They are simple principles enforced like laws. Control inputs. Set standards as baselines. Load identity with care. Normalize negative rehearsal. Shape context to reduce noise. Project a consistent trajectory. Take asymmetry over symmetry. Update beliefs fast. Protect privacy. Expand luck surface area. None of that will trend on social feeds. It is also how results compound. Decide whether you want to join the Fin group who move with this clarity. If you do, stay close. Treat these messages as reminders, not entertainment. You will feel alone while you change. Good. Isolation is what growth looks like before the world sees it. When you are ready for the next layer, you will recognize it. If you are not, you will not notice it. That is how this works. Most will click away and look for sugar. A few will look at their calendar, their inputs, and their private standards, and they will feel honest discomfort. That feeling is the door. Walk through it, and you will belong to a small circle that still manifests after they have what others want. Not because they need more, but because they refuse to let life decide for them.